Copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Okay, you guys, this video is from the news. Hold on. From Ramona DNA's Browning from ABC News Australia, because apparently the only news stations that can really report the truth about Scientology are in Australia.
The divorce of the Hollywood couple Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes has placed the Church of Scientology under unprecedented media scrutiny. In particular, its treatment of children has been in the spotlight following media speculation that the reason Katie Holmes left Tom Cruise was to protect her daughter from the religion.
Imagine that, you guys. Treatment of children. It gets better.
Miscavige Hill, the estranged niece of Scientology chief David Miscavige, has said the organisation is no place for an innocent child. We're about to hear from a woman who grew up in the church. Ramona DNS Browning is a former Scientology executive. She was sent to a Scientology school as a child, joined the exclusive...
An executive, you guys. Prestigious executive who grew up in Scientology, speaking out against the abuses of the children in Scientology. You know what you call that person? A righteous person. You know what else you call that person? An honest person, not a liar.
C organisation at the age of 15, but has now left the church. Ramona, welcome to the drum.
Hi.
What do you think of what Jenna Miscavige Hill said, that Scientology is no place for an innocent child?
Oh, I think that's very accurate. Yeah, it's definitely.
Accurate in what way?
I think that it's one thing to be an adult and to make a decision about spiritual practice or a religion or something of that type.
What does that sound like? Doesn't that sound like exactly what Serge Del Mar says all the time? Ring-a-ding-a-ding-a.
But it's a completely different thing to bring a child into that kind of environment where they don't have a choice about it.
Okay, one of the things that is a policy of L. Ron Hubbard's is a thing called security checking, and it starts at the age of 6, according to one of his policies. Can you explain to us what security checking is?
Look at that, you guys. On a news story, security checks of children. Not a bunch of older ex-Scientologists, most specifically executives, that will not refuse to acknowledge their participation, their orchestration of abusing children.
It's a way of basically finding out about your transgressions or wrongdoings or sins, depending on how you want to look at it. To unburden somebody.
So what kind of question?
Overts and withholds. Because, you know, every 4-year-old needs to tell older adults what their overts and withholds are. It's a way to induce shame and guilt.
Then would they be asking 6-year-olds?
All manner of things, you know, what have you done wrong, what are you withholding, things like that.
What are your parents doing?
Yeah.
That kind of thing?
Yeah.
Is it so they can gain information on other people within the church?
Well, it wouldn't be, that's not how it would be explained, but I'm not sure
Okay.
about that.
You weren't security checked until you were the age of 16, but you were certainly audited when you were younger. Now, auditing is the form of counselling that Church of Scientology uses. What kind of questions would...
That is misinformation, and I'm sure the gentleman, the news anchor, was not trying to misinform. But actually what security checks are, it's an interrogation as well as the auditing. You have the, what is it called? The various rundowns that they make people pay exorbitant amounts of money to be tortured or to torture the children. So, no offense to the news anchor because he's doing an amazing job, but actually auditing, security checks, Johannesburg check, all of them, it's interrogation. Almost like what they do in the Charlie Igloo Alpha. But what do I know?
They asking you when you were a child?
When I was a child, I had some auditing and lots of different things were covered. The thing that I feel was inappropriate to me as a child was that things of a sexual nature came up and I was questioned about this. And I found that very uncomfortable as a child.
At what kind of age were they asking you questions about this?
I was probably...
In other circles, many circles, that is called grooming. Grooming for pedophilia, LAPD. Grooming for pedophilia, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Grooming for pedophilia, Homeland Security. And all the other agencies that don't want to do anything about these children being so extraordinarily abused.
Around between the age of 8 and 10, I can't remember exactly, but young, really young. And the person auditing me was a man of, middle-aged man, of...
A middle-aged man. A middle-aged man. So what was she? Did she say she was around 8 years old? Let's see. So that's like a 28-year difference in age. By all other standards, Child Protective Services, various states throughout the United States, federal statutes, and also throughout the world, that is considered predatory. That is considered abusive.
35 to 40.
And how do you feel about that now?
Now, reflecting on it, I feel like it borders on sexual abuse. That's my feeling about it,
Doesn't border on nothing. It is sexual abuse. And isn't it interesting to see some of these 60-year-old prestigious executives that are married to women that are 28 years their junior? What does that tell you guys? What does that tell you guys? Wakey MF, wakey, wake up. Stop being ignorant.
And the Church of Scientology keeps all this information, don't they?
Yes, they do. Yeah. I mean, it is confidential, but they do keep it on record.
They just make it up that it's confidential. There are no United States laws. None. 0 United States laws that would say that is confidential. And furthermore, Scientology will label it as confidential, and it's anything but confidential. I remember Serge Delmar talking about how Debbie Cook was just thrilled every week in their meetings to talk about the young children who went out 2D. And that would include children who went out 2D with adults. For anyone who doesn't understand what 2D is, in Scientology, that's the second dynamic, and it can be interpreted many ways, but it's the sexual part of a marriage. Every time the children, like 5, 6 years old, that get RAPED by adults, they are told they have gone out 2D, and why did they pull it in? So apparently Debbie Cook was just, she thought that was the funniest shit in the world. I think Debbie Cook must have hung out with Jan Eastgate. What do you guys think?
You hear that information is sometimes used against former Scientologists as a threat, that they can use that information against them. Is that the case?
Look, I have heard that. It hasn't happened to me, but, I've heard that.
Okay, let's talk about the Sea Organisation, otherwise known as the Sea Org. It's the elite organisation in Scientology that you're a member of. Explain to us what it is.
And let's just keep it real. Let's just keep it 1,000% real. Ain't nothing elite about the Sea Org. And I feel that people that are in the Sea Org or were in the Sea Org were worked so heinously in such abhorrent slave-like conditions that they just have no way to decipher what really is going on, from exhaustion. I mean, there are certain lines that you don't draw. I mean, when you're protecting pedophiles, when you're in the upper echelons of Scientology, and you get memos sent to you about what children were sexually abused by adults, and you hold on to those documents, or what I understand is a big tool that they use in Scientology is to have the children scrap some of these documents, which is destroying of evidence. That's a crime. When you're helping to harbor a criminal pedophile, which enables them and allows them to go on and further abuse more children, that's aiding and abetting. And that's just part of it. There's way more crimes that were committed. And some of these senior executives over 60 and in those age groups, it's time to fess up to what you did and turn yourself in, or write a confession note to the Federal Bureau of Investigations and or Homeland Security, so that when Homeland Security is doing thorough investigations of all this sexual abuse of children, they will know that you at least did the right thing, the real, truly ethical thing, and you didn't hide and try to make yourself a hero. Because a person who hides sexual abuse of children is not a hero. Won't be a hero now or ever. Ever. And it does make one scratch their head and wonder, birds of a feather. It makes a person wonder, doesn't it?
Basically, like joining, being a nun or a monk or a devotee of a religion. So you're absolutely committed. You give away most of your possessions, and you completely dedicate yourself to the service of Scientology.
And you live on about $50 a week and you sign a billion-year contract to join the Sea Org, don't you?
That's right, yeah.
Why a billion-year contract?
It's a symbolic contract because they believe in reincarnation in Scientology, and so you're dedicating not only this life but all of your lives for the next billion years to this.
How's that a recipe for slavery? Dedicating this life, and then when you come back in the next, you're going to dedicate that life, and then the life after, the life after. It reminds me of those Roman slaves that used to row the boats for the elite. How many times in the last 10 years have you seen some of these so-called elite blue bloods raise their right hand to the sky, to the sun, with their palm facing downward, just like a very famous German dictator, whom I think, in my opinion, he was kind of like a puppet. That's what I'm trying to say.
Service of the Sea Org.
There's been some speculation in the media that there were concerns that Suri Cruz would have to join the Sea Org. The Church of Scientology has said, well, that's ridiculous because she's only 6 and that we don't take people until the age of 16. What do you say to that?
I don't know.
That's one of their cover stories. How many times have we heard this, you guys? Go outside Clearwater. Go watch Darth Zander. All his videos, the Sea Org Alley. Do those children look 16 to you? And most importantly, do those children look happy? The fact that various Los Angeles police officers, Hemet police officers, Denver police officers, Chicago, Chi-Town police officers could even align themselves with such a criminal organization when all the information is out on the rampant criminal activities going on in Scientology? How is this possible? When police officers are supposed to uphold the law, not circumvent it, not help criminal organizations hide crimes, like they so obviously do in Clearwater, Florida. It's obvious, and that's my opinion. I'm sticking to it.
What they're doing now, I know I was 15 when I was recruited for the Sea Org, so that definitely is younger than 16. I know of other people that were very close to me when I was a child that joined at around 12. And I personally recruited people when I was in the Sea Org that were children, that were around the age of 12, 13.
It also reminds me of one of the statements that I was reading the other day, in which an adult, I think it was actually yesterday, which an adult had brought up. In 1997, he was in the RPF, and he saw a 12-year-old in the RPF. And you know who signs off on this? All these agencies that refuse to investigate and break this up. There, in my opinion, there are zero excuses at this point. These children are being heinously abused. And according to our laws, it's illegal. So what are you going to do?
How are children treated within the Sea organisation at that age of 12 or 13?
They're treated like any other Sea Org member, so there's no differentiation.
Adults in small bodies. Imagine the level of sickness it takes to create a false organization, false religion. L. Ron Hubbard openly admitted the reason he was going to create a religion was to make money. And also, I forget whom it was mentioned, one of the main reasons in the United States that they categorized Scientology as a religion was to avoid fraud charges. And I think that goes for worldwide. But I mean, as we can see around us, lots of people can be paid off. It doesn't matter what kind of title they hold. They're totally fine with 4- and 5-year-old children getting raped in auditing rooms. That's a fact. Get upset at me saying that? That's an MF fact. And it's supposed to be against the law.
Between ages.
So how hard do they have to work, for example?
Well, they would have a very similar schedule. I think possibly they would have a slightly less long schedule than the adults. My memory's a little hazy on that, but pretty much the same. Pretty much the same.
Subjected to the same kind of punishments that the Sea Org? Explain to us the punishments within the Sea Org.
Basically, depending on the level of trouble that you're in, you'd be subjected to things like heavy labour, segregation from the rest of the crew, so working in the engine room or the bilges.
And you have to run everywhere, is that right, when you're punished under the Sea Org?
On particular...
The engine room. That's their favorite. I do know that there's the law of the sea or the law of the water, and there's the law of the land. But I'm not certain who would apply the laws of the water. So that piece of junk Freewinds, I don't even know if it's still in operation. I think it is. It's about on its last leg. Whom would apply the laws there? Because a lot of countries, people in those various countries where Freewinds kept docking, absolutely hated L. Ron Hubbard and people on that boat. And you could see why. And I still to this day, and I'll go to my grave, when it's my time to go, I believe a lot of children, a lot of people were thrown off that boat. I mean, you're never going to find bodies. I believe that.
Programs, on particular re-indoctrination programs, you have to run everywhere. You're not allowed to talk unless spoken to. That's more...
And dress in black, is that right?
That's the Rehabilitation Project Force, which is very specifically a re-indoctrination program that some people are put on.
Romana, the Church of Scientology has a policy called disconnection, but they deny that it exists. But you're going through something related to disconnection at the moment, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Since I spoke out, my mother has been put in a very difficult position by the church in that she is basically being faced with a situation where, as a Scientologist, and she is a dedicated Scientologist, she cannot continue with her services in...
By the way, dedicated equals highly indoctrinated. I really wonder what some of these people would do if they could break out of the mind control, the brainwashing, if they could just for 5 minutes have a thought that was independent of Scientology. A lot of them never will. That's just the truth. But I wonder how many would be able to break that. Really, who wants to constantly be getting sect checked? Johannesburg. What's the other one? Introspection rundown, which has basically driven a lot of people to psychosis. Imagine children getting this. And various governments of the world just sign off on it like it's fine. Kind of people would endorse something like that.
Scientology while staying in connection with me, based on the fact that I've spoken out about the abuses I experienced in the Sea Org.
So are they putting you under pressure to not talk out again?
Well, they are... Let's put it this way. Through my mother, they are putting me under pressure to not speak out because they're putting her in a horrific position where she has to choose between her spiritual faith, which is really important to her, and her connection with her daughter.
So given what you're going through, the pressure of having to not speak to your mother again, why are you continuing to speak out?
Because I feel it is really, really unfair, first of all, that my mother should be put in such a position. And when I've been told to my face that there is no policy of disconnection, and then the absolute opposite is being presented to me, I feel I have to say something and I have to speak out, because it's not right, and I'm not the only person that's going through this.
What does the policy of disconnection do to families who've been involved with Scientology?
Well, it has devastating effects on families. It separates families. It rips them apart.
Now, again, I want to cover this, and I'm not trying to be cruel or shade everybody. When Scientologists Scientologists is a little different, and some of the ex-Scientologists talk about this, disconnection. Disconnection ruins families. I understand it. And I don't want to be mean, but the only way that disconnection can be applied is if the family members decide they are going to enforce this fictitious policy that does not exist unless they breathe it into fruition. It's not going to happen unless they accept it as real. You know what I mean? So responsibility needs to be on whom it needs to be on. Just like various people talk about, Scientology parents need to take responsibility. I totally agree with that. And it's not that some people aren't worth forgiving or redemption. You know, like, I really love how Kelly Copter was talking about how she and her father are building a new relationship. He takes full responsibility. So, okay, here we go to the next.
And so we hear of stories of people not even knowing that their children have died.
That's right. Yeah.
Because of the policy of disconnection.
That's right.
Kerry, have you got a question or a comment?
Well, look, I just first of all have to say congratulations for having the courage to do what you're doing, both in terms of leaving, which we talked a little bit earlier about how hard all that is, and so to do that, and also to have the courage to stand up and do what you're doing now. I mean,
see, a lot of media people, in my opinion, I really think they were trying to help in the capacity that they could help. When you're going up against a machine, you know, just like in the Matrix, the whole thing is a machine. And if you have government officials and you have government agencies and police officers and, you know, various agencies that actually should be breaking this up that refuse to do their jobs, the media people alone can't do it. I mean, they gave it their best. There's probably millions of views on this story. And I've seen a lot of really good stories. And I've seen a lot of stand-up media people. And I think if they had their way, they'd break it all the way up if they could. So anyways, this is my opinion.
there's been some stuff in the paper again about Suri being groomed to be the world leader of this organisation. I mean, that was kind of the thinking. Do you think that they would have been planning that far ahead for someone like that who's 6 years old?
Look, obviously I can only give you my opinion.
Yep, sure.
I don't know for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised. And yes, it is the kind of thing that they would plan ahead. I mean, when I was in the Sea Org, they were talking about the return of Ron Hubbard. So it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah.
Romani, you talked before about being sent down to the engine room. Now, you were aboard a ship called the Free Winds, where they train a lot of Scientologists to very high levels. I think one of Tom Cruise's, maybe his 40th birthday party was on the Free Winds. What's the engine room, and why do you get sent to the engine room?
There are a lot of stories about Tom Cruise's 40th birthday. And up to now, I'm not going to say much about Tom because he's a multi-billionaire. But I believe a lot of these celebrities know exactly what's going on. 100%.
Basically, if you are in what they call ethics trouble, so if you're doing something against command intention. So you're not doing what they want you to do, basically. There's various levels of, pressure put on you to come back into line. And one of these things is to go down to the engine room and clean, paint, remove rust, work under the deck plates, work in the tubes, all that. Well, I've done all of those things.
So, and it's dangerous? Dangerous
Well,
work?
yeah, I mean, it's more the mind control aspect of it. I think it's mentally dangerous.
I wish we had visuals for exactly what the ships look like. Oh, of course we don't, because Scientology always loses it when people want to take pictures of the inside of their dystopian Brave New World.
I don't think it's physically dangerous necessarily, but it's very much you go down there until you do what they want you to do. And that, I definitely experience pretty...
So why don't people walk away from that situation? Why don't they leave if they're being abused?
Well, I know that's hard for some people to understand, but having experienced it myself, it's like because you're in that mind control of, this is the only way to spiritual freedom, and you've accepted that and you believe that, you feel if you do something against the organisation that you're going to have your spiritual freedom taken away from you.
So how did you get out? Sorry, I know it's pretty blunt, but how did you, what is it what happened that made you say, I'm not doing
That's a thought stopper, by the way.
this anymore?
Look, it was a slow incremental realisation up to a crisis point where I realised that my mind was not my own. And eventually, after trying to leave many, many times unsuccessfully, I managed to leave. So, yeah.
And how did you leave the Free Winch, the ship? Because they take your passport.
Yeah. I had to go through their process of leaving. I did try to escape at one point unsuccessfully, but I finally managed to get through their whole scrutinisation and sec checking, etc., and leave. So they allowed me to go, but this was after 5 years of trying.
There are a lot of celebrities in Scientology, Tom Cruise, John Travolta. Is that a tactical thing that the Scientologists kind of go out to recruit big names in order to kind of build the movement? Or
From my understanding, I've never worked with celebrities in that way, but from my understanding, there are policies around, the benefits of having opinion leaders, which is what they would call it in Scientology.
And I think it's the fact that there was a certain acting school in California that a number of actors went through and became Scientologists, and there were Scientologists teaching at that acting school.
Yeah, look, I can't comment on that because I don't know much about it, but I have heard of that, such things like that.
Well, Romana, thanks very much for coming in and telling us your story tonight on The Drum.